All right, so let's have a look at how I would analyze an individual assessment task using a Guttman chart. In this, we're going to be doing it in Google Sheets. I actually think there's part of it, and you'll see where it comes up, where this is much easier to do in Excel, but that's because of the way Google Sheets works. It's one little function, the way they allow you to sort data. Basically, I'm hoping they sort it out at some point. See what I did there? So let's have a look at what we've got. This is what we've set up. So we've got a bunch of class lists, student classes. So we're pretending this is a cohort. We've got two classes here. We've got Science B, Science A. And most often when I see this done, I see it done with an exam. But in this case, we're actually going to do it with a report. And I think the reason we chose that is because we want you to see that this can be used in other ways. For example, if you're writing a literacy task or you're marking essays, if you turn your rubric into markable sections, like I'll show you in a second, you're actually able to analyze very well and very easily what they did and didn't understand. So let's have a quick look here. So in the top columns, or top rows, we have, before we break that down, let's go this way. Okay, student. These are all the student names. Here's their classes. There's two classes worth there. So if we go down the bottom there, there's two classes. Let's delete this. I mean, it's useful, but I want to show you how we did it. Okay, so we've got students, class, and a bunch of numbers. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about that in a second. The first thing I did was I broke the rubric up into sections. Section 1, 1A, B, C, D, were all the different places where they could get marks from the introduction. So you see, we've numbered the sections here, just like you would numbers of questions in an exam, 1 through to whatever. And then above that, we've given the potential value for each section. So for example, 1, 1, 2, the third part of the introduction, 1C, was worth 2. And we label that up top, introduction, variables, method, table, graph, and you see here again all the different sections that there were marks in the graphing part of it, and then discussion, and at the back, conclusion. Okay, cool. So let's have a look at how we would organize this. So we set that up, and then as we're marking it, we put in the score that each student gets for each section. We can see that Buffy's actually done really well, whereas if we go down to, say, I don't know, Jane Cobb has not done as well, because there's more zeros here. And we can see that by looking at it. We can just look at the marks and work that out. But it's really hard to work out quickly, and you're a teacher, you're time poor, where they've done poorly, where they need to improve. So let's have a look. All right. We go along here, and we've got this. Now, one of the first things we're going to need to do is we're going to need a total column. So we've introduced all of our data along here, and then we want to go equals sum, brackets, because it's a sum value, and then we want to include this value to this value. And I've held down shift and just clicked, and that's given me the whole lot there. Okay, sweet. 45, so the whole thing's worth 45. This is our totals column. I might like to make that in bold, and we'll make it blue so it matches the rest. Nice. Yeah, just I like to give headers. And then we do the same thing. So we go sum, tab, value, and we can just drag across. We just want this one row here. That's all of them. Brackets. Nice. So Buffy got 36 out of 45. We could put a percentage column in there, but I'm not too stressed about that right now. And we drag this all the way down to there. Nice. So we now have, and let's make this so it's all the right size. Excellent. So we now have a totals column. So we're almost there with our Guttman chart. Now you'll notice this sheet is called raw data. We can copy this across in a minute. But one thing I want to make sure is that we have a raw data sheet, and we enter our data in here, and we can make everything dynamic and all that sort of stuff, and that's fun. But we want to be able to have the raw data so we can lock it. so that no changes can happen accidentally. Any changes that happen are intentional, and that's important. But we can do that later. But right now, we want a standardized score. So for our Guttman chart, we need to know the order of the students and how they performed in each class or cohort. You could do a big one if you wanted. We also need to know the order in which, so the questions from easiest to hardest. Okay, so to do that, we use a standardized score. So we'll give that a label, SS. And now we need to work out a way that we can compare our questions worth 1 and our questions worth 2 or even 3, I believe, over here. So we're comparing apples to apples. So let's have a look. Okay, equals sum. What's that? That's nothing. Sum. Okay. So I want to include this one. If I hold down Shift and Control and push down, that will be the whole lot. So that was Shift Control down, and that gave me all of that column. Brackets divided by. Now we go up here and we go to the question value, and we press Enter. Now the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to merge these cells, because why not? And I'll give this value just so that is labeled. I'll justify that right, and so now we know what that is. Excellent. Okay, so we've got this. Now, as none of those values were fixed, if I drag this across, we get a standardized score for each of them. See, this is already really helpful. So we can see that given that there were, how many were there? 48, 44. So 44 students in this cohort. That means 44 is the total possible mark we can get. So 1A was actually done a bit worse than 1B. That's really interesting. And we can see that straight away. But again, we want to look at large groups of data as we're going. So now that we've got this in, I want to copy this. Now I would lock it. Actually, what I would do is I would make it dynamic on the next page, but we're not going to worry about that. That's a different video. So if we come over here and we press Control V, we'll just copy it as it is. And then if we go down here and we go across to here and we double click there, aha, we're back to the size we want. Now, I'm going to label this sheet because we should always label our sheets. Guttman, Task 1, Science B. I'm going to look at Science B. We'll pretend that's my class. So we'll have a look here. So what this means is we click on Buffy because they're all organized according to science, what class they're in. And then we can reorganize it according to whatever, but we'll show you that in a second. And then I'll click on Jane Cobb because he's the last student in Science A, and I'm going to delete rows 4 to 25. Yep, I'm happy with that. And now I only have the Science B students. That's good. That works for me. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to organize the students from top to bottom. In fact, actually from bottom to top. And let's do that now. So Peter Parker, Harvey Dent. Let's see where we all went. Okay, so if we go, we want to sort data. Sort range. Sort by column AF, because, you know, that is what it is. We want to go ascending, so lowest to top. We want our highest performing student at the very bottom of our graph. And we can have it. We can check now. Harvey Dent was our lowest performing student. Henry McCoy, that's a shame. He'd normally do much better, was 20. Donna Troy, right down to Bruce Wayne. But what do you expect? So now for the really fiddly part. This is the part that makes this easier to do in Excel. One of the things that Google Sheets does not do, there is a way to do it, but it's fiddly and it gives you a second set of data, is to, like, it's all transposed. It's actually a really cool bit of code, but it's not useful here. Is to, it lets you organize things top to bottom by row, but it doesn't allow you to organize things by column. And what we want is we want these here to be in order of highest on the left and lowest on the right. So what this means is we're going to have to do it manually. And the way you can do that, for example, you'll see why I'm doing this in a second, is you click here. Now you click on when that little hand pops up, and we can run that, and you want it to be in between 22. Okay, so we've switched its place, and you can see it says 22, 20, 20. That's not where it's going to stay, but this is me moving them in order. So I'm now going to do this silently so I can speed it up for you. But this is the fiddliest part, and it's my least favorite thing about doing this in Google Sheets. Aside from that, Google Sheets is fine. All right, so that was a fiddly mission. Let's just check to make sure we're all good. It's worth it, I promise. But that's fiddly. In fact, in Google Sheets, in Excel, that is so easy to do, it's trivial. Okay, so we're good. Now, so we have our students in order of of highest performing from lowest to top, going vertically down. And we have our questions from hardest to easiest, so lowest number to highest number, moving left. All right, so let's get to the next bit, which is also a bit fiddly, but again, worth it. And that is the conditional formatting. So what we want to do is we want to select all of the questions that have the same potential value and conditionally format them in a way that works. So let's select all the questions that have a value of. All right, so now let's conditionally format. No. Oh. All right, let's try that again. No. All right, now I would like to say at this point, I'm super agnostic when it comes to my data, which website we use or which tech tool we use, but Google Sheets is just a little bit fiddlier and a little bit more sensitive than Excel. So we go to conditional formatting in format. And we want to give it a color scale. Now we can give it this way if we want. I would like to give our maximum to that and our maximum to green. And we'll use a green-white color scale. You can use traffic lights or whatever works for you, but I'm going to do this. So now, we close that off again. We select the next range of colors that have the same value. That data, conditional formatting, color scale, change it so that it's reverse. Try and make sure you use the same color green. It'll just make your life easier. All right, close that off again. Now for the threes. There's a couple of twos I missed. All right, so we have our conditional formatting done. Now, what does this show us? Is a very, very good and fair question. What it shows us is that this area here is the zone of proximal development, this sort of ellipses area. Now, with that, we can infer that, say, Harvey up here, he needs to work on this area here before he bothers working on the parts which were the hardest. For example, these two sections, and this actually makes sense in the discussion, were the hardest part for this set of data. The method, however, method 3b, that's probably something like use past tense. So this class here has forgotten to use past tense a lot, and that's something really simple. That's surprising that that is so low. And what that means is, it's either marked very harshly, but it's kind of an either either or. So I would say that's something that in this class here, I have not taught that very well. Whereas the discussion, that probably should be the hardest part. That's the most advanced section. So our zone of proximal development here shows us that there's no point Harvey working on the discussion section until he starts getting his graphs and tables in order here. Okay, whereas a student like Dick Grayson can start working around here before moving on to the discussion. But we get the students down here. So, for example, Emma Frost, Selena, and Dinah, and these guys can start working on their discussions and just tidying it up because they've kind of almost nailed it. And Bruce down here, he also did the method one wrong. Wonder what happened there. Anyway, so it tells us that, right? It gives us an individual student's roadmap for where they should start working. It gives us the zone of proximal development for the class. It gives us a look on what was actually the hardest questions. What sections do we need to go back and teach as a class? What do we need to focus on? And what can we kind of ignore? Like, we'll say, for example, this means that all of the variables were on the left-hand side of a table. They talked about the trend in the discussion. Go us. We've nailed that. We don't need to cover that anymore. But then we get down to the things in this section here where we could work on some stuff. And I'll give you one more thing. So, when we talk to a class, we want to be able to tell them as a class what their strengths and weaknesses were. So to do this, we would use I would break it up into thirds, right? If you're above a third, if you're in the top third for a question for your standardized score, I'd say you're pretty good, you're fine. If you're in the bottom third, I'd say it's a weakness. So top third's a strength, bottom third of the potential score is a weakness, and everything in the middle is not a strength or a weakness. It's just we're all right at it, and we can work on our weaknesses, or we can work on this other stuff first. Okay, so how would I show that just at a glance? The whole point of this chart is that it shows us everything at a glance for when we're talking to the students or planning, etc. So if I go if, let's do some nested ifs, and we'll do a nested if, and we'll do a whole video on. Let's do ifs. Okay, no, yeah, all right. Now let's do nested ifs. Okay, so if logical expression, and that is, let's shrink this down. So if this value here is greater than, let's do this. Count A, this range here, because we want this to be as dynamic as possible, right? We want it to have the chance to be able to, if I add a student in here, for it to move, and if we do this, it will move. And then we fix that, so it's in that range. We want that for when we drag it sideways. So if count A, that means it'll add up all those values, so to tell you what the potential score should be. Multiplied, let's give it brackets, multiplied by, because we want it to be greater than 2/3. So we go 0.666. Let's give it an extra one. Yep, that's good. Then we go, yep, that's cool. So that's our logical test. If it's true, we want it to say success. If it's false, we want to go for our nested if. So if it's false, we want to set up our next thing. Okay, so we'll go C27 again, is less than count A, all these values again. Again, it's important that we fix that. So when we drag it across, okay, then, this is fun. Multiplied by, let's go 0.33. Yeah, it's fine. It's not as funny if you've got 3 3s in there. It's only half as evil. Comma. Yeah. So then we want to go, no, we're going to close it off. No, we don't. We almost made a mistake there. We're going to close this one off. Close that off there. Now we're back in our logical test. Comma. If this is true, if it's less than that value, we want it to say weakness. Now, if it's false, we'll just give it a space, so it's a blank sheet. And then we need an extra thing. It's all closed off. That's magical. All right, let's go. Bang. Success! Great success. Drag this across. Ah, and look how well this class is done, right? So we can say that all of this, they're actually strengths. This stuff's fairly middling. It's in the middle, but it's only this last one. This was our weakness. This is the one where we got less than a third of the possible marks. 7.5 is a third of the 23. So less than a third, it only really happened here. So this class has done really well. Now, if you want to show this to the class, I am completely down with that. And I would do this in class as well. So what I would do is I would highlight these and I would fill them in black. So now the students, unless you click on it, they can't see where they are on this graph, or they can't see, and this is more important, where everyone else is on this graph. And yeah, so we can see individuals, roadmaps. We can see what the class needs to work on. We can see what our strengths and weaknesses are as a class. We can see where our zone of proximal development is for the whole class and for individuals. So I think the Guttman chart is really useful. I think Google Sheets is a bit fiddlier than Excel to do it in, but you can do it. Like I said, I'm fairly agnostic as to which one we use, but your school is going to make that choice for you, most likely. So yeah, that's our Guttman charts. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and we'll get back to you as quick as we can. It was a long one. Thanks for hanging in there. There's a lot of complicated things happening. All right, bye now.